Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Rethink ABA Startup Community webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about best practices for onboarding and training new hires. While we wait for everyone to get settled, I have a poll question that I'm going to launch. So please take a moment to just let us know how many staff you currently employ. All right, so it looks like we have a pretty mixed group today. Again, I want to welcome everyone to another Rethink Startup Community webinar. My name is Erin Mayberry, and I am Director of Community Engagement here at Rethink. And today I have Kaitlyn Taylor joining. Kaitlyn is one of our implementation managers at Rethink, so she does a lot with all of our new customers in terms of getting them set up in our platform and onboarding all of their staff. So thanks, Kaitlyn, for joining us. We do have one more poll before we get started, so I'm going to close that one and open the second one. And just let us know, are you planning on onboarding any new staff in the next 6 months or so? And it looks like everyone is, so you have come to the right place. I hope you guys enjoy everything that Kaitlyn's going to share with you today about preparing for onboarding, some best practices in training staff, and then considerations for the future. So Kaitlyn, I am going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Erin. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you were able to join me today and excited to help you get started as you're starting up your new business. Onboarding new hires and training new hires is something that's going to be essential to successfully growing your company. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to go over these basic key objectives on how to prepare for your new hires, some of those best training practices, and then how do you plan for growth. We really want to go over foundational information to help you kind of get that kickstart so you can successfully launch your business. Most importantly, you need to be prepared for those new hires. This is, again, going to be essential to that onboarding process. Things that I often recommend for customers is make sure prior to that start date for that new hire, you're sure that you have all needed documentation. This can be things for that new hire, such as background checks, signed employee contracts, any type of certification documentation you might need, whether it's CPR, their RBT, BCBA. Make sure you can have that information prepared and ready prior to your new hire starting. You should also be thinking about needed materials that are available for your new hire that they might need to be referencing day one at your company. This can be things like your employee handbook, policies and procedures. Okay, new hires need to know things like what are they allowed to wear the first day of work and maybe your dress code policy. So make sure those items are also together as well. Materials that your employee might need as they're starting is going to be things like their business email, as well as maybe a computer or a work phone. Having this stuff for your new hire day one is going to allow them to be able to start using that immediately, right? You want to make sure all of that communication is going through those official business lines, potentially rather than using something like a Gmail or like an iCloud email that's something personal for that new hire. Ensuring your new hire has a job description that outlines clear roles and responsibilities is something that's going to be essential for you. One role within your organization and the way you're viewing maybe that BCBA role is going to probably be vastly different than what that BCBA did at a previous company or an RBT. Having a new hire job description that outlines those clear roles and responsibilities is really going to provide that new hire with a transparent outline of what you're expecting their role to look like and how they're going to be contributing to your company. I always say consider assigning a mentor or a staff member who's really going to lead that training. This could be a specific trainer. it's really nice for a new hire to have one main point of contact that they're working with. As you know, many of us have probably been at previous companies. Right now you're branching off, you're starting your own company. Starting a new job can be somewhat overwhelming. You're not really sure what to expect. You might not know anybody. So giving them that one individual that's maybe that trainer or mentor to support and guide them through the onboarding process is going to make that process a lot smoother and more pleasurable for that new hire. Something else I always suggest is creating a new hire onboarding schedule. This is something we're actually going to dive a little bit deeper in, as this might be a newer concept to you. An onboarding schedule is going to be exactly what it sounds like. It's going to be a document that's really going to outline what that onboarding process is going to look like for that new hire. This is something that you do want to make sure is prepared for your new hire prior to them starting. So you're not having any downtime of trying to figure out where they should go and how they're going to get trained. You have a plan that you're ready to execute day one, so they're ready to start getting trained and they can start fulfilling their job duties immediately. Things you're going to want to include is you're going to want to include days and times on that onboarding or training schedule. Okay, days and times of those events or those activities that individuals should be participating in. That new hire is going to need to know where they should be and when. This might need to include things like the location if you're maybe providing in-home services of clients' homes. The duration of onboarding as well will be outlined in this document. You'll be able to see day one of training through whatever the duration of that onboarding schedule is going to be. That way your employee is going to know exactly what to expect and how long they're going to potentially be training in. The duration of onboarding is likely going to vary depending on role. BCBAs, right, have different job responsibilities than RBTs. That BCBA might be in training a little bit longer than those RBTs. So that's really something you, as the business owner, should be really thinking about and what that's going to look like and how long they need to train in. And also kind of thinking about, you know, maybe costs associated with training and how to maximize that as well. Adding in something as simple as a meet and greet with that trainer or mentor day one is, again, going to be really helpful for that new employee. As I said before, it can be a little overwhelming starting at a new organization. So giving them that person day one they can connect with, start building rapport, know who they're going to go to so they don't feel like they're getting bounced around, is going to help for that smooth process. This also is going to highlight kind of the new hire's first exposure to company culture. So when you're thinking about who those trainers are going to be, you want to probably pair them up with somebody that you know is very competent, they're going to be responsive, and they're really going to highlight what type of company culture you're creating at your organization. Company culture is a big topic, right? Everybody wants to work somewhere that they enjoy working at and they feel the culture is strong and great. So making sure you're kind of thinking about that day one as you're getting them in there with that mentor. Most importantly in this onboarding schedule, you need to be outlining those onboarding and training activities. Okay? This can be a variety of different things. In the past, when I've onboarded new hires, I always found it was really helpful to make sure within maybe those first couple of days of training, whether it's the first day, the first 3 days, that I am putting aside time for that new hire to complete any type of mandatory training. Often our funders, maybe our state, they require things like HIPAA training, mandatory reporting. Those are going to be trainings that they have to do at some point. So just have them knock them out day one, make sure they have time scheduled so you can ensure that they're in compliance with those requirements. Also, if they need to meet with HR or go over the company handbook, this might also be something good to include during that time as well. Your new hire, you're going to want them to really see what their day-to-day job responsibilities look like. Because again, this is going to vary maybe from their previous history at their previous company. You want to ensure that you're going to provide opportunities that are very comprehensive for them to shadow other individuals in their role so they have a feel for that day-to-day. So for example, if I was to onboard potentially a new BCBA, I would be thinking about what are those job responsibilities of that BCBA. This could be everything from RVT supervision, parent training, maybe scheduling, report writing. you're going to want to make sure that your new hire is able to watch somebody else perform. So shadowing them completing these different job duties. This way they have an idea of what it looks like and they're able to be trained in on each of those specific job duties. Things like scheduling and report writing, I would say it's okay. It might not be direct services or supervision of that nature, but those again are different job duties that can look different from company to company. And if you're wanting your new hires to do something very specific, have them shadow somebody else so everybody is implementing in the same fashion for those different tasks. Adding in time to pre-brief or debrief before these shadow sessions can be really helpful. It doesn't need to be anything super intense, but things like a pre-brief session for maybe 10-15 minutes for the trainer and the new hire to connect prior to attending that shadow session is going to be helpful. That trainer is going to be able to lay out expectations for the new hire of what they're going to see during that observation period. That trainer can do things like note maybe things they want them to observe specifically, or assign them with different activities so that shadow session is really effective. On the flip side, having that debrief session is also going to be helpful. So time to connect after that shadow session. This way that new hire is able to go over in the moment, immediately after that observation session, any questions, concerns. Maybe if they completed an activity that the trainer assigned to them, they can get feedback immediately so they can, keep moving through training and have any questions answered quicker than waiting, days later. Also, it's going to be important that you think about ways to incorporate time for that new hire to perform their job duties with support and supervision. Some of these duties that the individual might be engaging in might be brand new skills for them. So we are going to want to make sure that there is time for somebody else that's seasoned and competent in those job duties that can provide that support, is able to observe that individual completing those job duties so they can support as needed, so they can increase their skill set and become competent in that area. Not only is it important to prepare your new hires, you actually want to prepare your trainers. Your trainers are really going to be the key to getting your company to be a well-oiled machine in terms of, everybody's implementing the same way, everybody's writing reports the same way. So you want to prepare those trainers because they're going to be the ones actually delivering training to the new hires. So you want to set them up for success. Something to note is trainers are not always necessarily in a supervisory role to that new hire. A trainer might be somebody that's just in the same position who will be their colleague. It's important, though, to meet with those trainers and set up clear expectations of what you want to occur during your training and what that will look like to really identify what that relationship is. Those trainers are going to have to give feedback to those new hires. So kind of laying out what that's going to be will kind of help things be smooth and understanding, this is going to be for a short time. You are going to provide feedback so everybody's on the same page and no one's feelings get hurt. Providing your trainers with a list of what should occur at each training session is going to be really valuable. This is where you are going to be able to dictate what is really occurring during training and how you want your trainers to execute that information. This could be everything from noting activities that need to be modeled by the trainer to ensure that that individual sees all of those job duties. Talking to your trainers about maybe potential things to assign in terms of activities during shadow sessions. Okay. Something I've done in the past that I found was really helpful, and I think it is helpful when other trainers do it, is if you are going to have an individual shadow something like, let's say, a direct therapy session. Maybe I'm a BCBA and I'm going to shadow somebody performing an RBT performing a direct therapy session. You might have the BCBA collect data and the trainer collect data on a specific program and then compare that data and see what the IOA is. This way you're kind of able to address any discrepancies that are coming up in the moment. Also things like completing mock session notes. Why that new hire is maybe shadowing a session. Maybe they complete a session note on how they would complete it if they were running session. This is something that you also want to see fidelity in. So, you know, those session notes are clear, consistent across, as often funders have specific requirements around information in there. Also importantly, noting questions. Questions are going to come up. They're going to be, those new hires are going to be thinking of a lot of different things and having questions. So having them note during those shadow sessions to make sure that they can get all of their questions answered by that trainer during that debrief. Also, prep your trainers to start thinking proactively about how they're going to contrive opportunities for that new hire to practice these new skills you're expecting them to perform. Sometimes this might need a little bit of planning, so just kind of prepping your trainers to be forward thinking about that so they know how to incorporate that. Maybe you do want your new hires, you know, participating in parent training and shadowing that. So your trainers should be thinking about things like, who's a really good parent that we could pair up with this new hire to maybe run a parent training session that will be, you know, receptive. So we are setting up those new hires for success as well. Something else you want to prep your trainers with is providing them with a competency list, a competency checklist. We're actually going to go ahead and we're actually going to dive a little bit deeper into what a competency checklist is, but this is going to be a valuable resource to help kind of guide training for your trainers when they're working with your new hires. Now let's go ahead that we've talked about, right? We've prepared our trainers, we've prepared our for our new hires, we have all of our documents, you know, we're ready to get in there, we have our schedule, we're gonna actually start training our new hire. We're gonna go through some different best practices. These are gonna be some training practices that you can incorporate within the onboarding schedule to ensure that your new hire is effectively trained. So a competency checklist. Some of you on this call, you may have heard of it. You might be a BCBA, right? Just starting out your business. You've heard of the RBT competency exam, okay? Same concept, right? This is gonna be a document that's gonna be outlining specific behaviors or skills you want to see that new hire demonstrate. This is gonna be important. This is gonna clear up for you, clear up for yourself, the trainers, as well as that new hire, expectations on what you want them to be doing and what you want to see them do competently. Okay. Again, roles look different from company to company. So you want to have those different areas outlined and highlighted so they know exactly what they should be doing. This document's also going to be able to help guide training for your trainers. Your trainers are going to also have a copy of that competency checklist. This is now where they're going to be able to start forward thinking and thinking about how, okay, I know there's these 5 skills that I need to make sure they see. I need to highlight them during those shadow sessions. I need to make sure I model. I need to make sure I contrive opportunities. With competency checklists, you should always have a score that's going to demonstrate kind of competency. So your organization internally should be thinking about what are those job duties you want to see from that new hire and skills, list them out, and then what is that cutoff score to determine if they're competent to perform their job duties without support or supervision. There's quite a bit of literature out there on this. Often competency checklists range, scores usually are like 80 to 90%. Again, this is something internally you can think about. You can also, you know, look up some research articles around it as well if you would like. But this is going to be specific to you. I always tell customers, think about when you're creating a competency checklist, if there's critical items on there. Maybe you have a couple items that are critical to you and imperative for your business operations. Maybe those are critical items and they have to pass those key pieces. But again, nobody's going to be perfect, right? They might pass their competency checklist and they have a 90%, but there's going to be a couple areas that they still need to show some improvement in. Make sure that your trainers are thinking about a way to address those areas that need improvement and how to fit in additional training. Next, let's jump in a little bit to behavioral skills training. Most of you have probably heard this. Often it's referred to as BST. Often people use this for clients when they're maybe teaching social skills. But BST is a really great evidence-based methodology for teaching skills. BST is very effective in training staff. Okay, I listed out here for you just the steps of what BST is, but it's really basic. You want to make sure maybe when you're teaching somebody one of those items off that competency list, maybe we're talking about how do you prompt, okay? You're going to describe the skill, you're going to provide a written description, you're going to demonstrate that skill, so that trainer might model that skill. You might have that trainee or that new hire practice that skill, whether it's via role play, whether it's live with a client. You're going to provide feedback, and you're going to keep practicing and providing feedback until that individual has demonstrated mastery. Again, mastery is going to be, whatever that score is potentially on that competency checklist. It can be a variety of things. You might say we need to see them do it 4 out of 5 opportunities when they practice, but that again, something internally that you're going to be thinking about and setting up for your organization. So I wanted to note for you all just some different feedback and training strategies. You're going to notice some of these things on the list are things we probably do in our day-to-day life if you are a clinician or coming from a clinical setting. These are things I would, when you're preparing your trainers, talk to them about. Remind them, here's some strategies you can have in your toolkit. You probably already know how to use them, but we want to use them with our new hires. Your trainers might be providing some level of verbal feedback to those new hires during those shadow sessions or during observation periods. They might just be simply just kind of coaching from the side. Modeling, right? We already kind of talked about that. When your new hires first training, they should be shadowing individuals performing the same job duties that they will do. So those individuals will be modeling quite a bit what those skills look like. Role play. I personally love role play. I know when I used to train staff, I used to get a lot of pushback. People don't love role play. It feels a little awkward. It's kind of a little weird feeling maybe, but it's something I really encourage people to kind of keep in their toolkit and really utilize. The reason I say that is role playing with the new hire and the trainer really allows for that new hire to practice that maybe newer emerging skill in a very safe, controlled environment, right? We want our new hires to be successful. The trainer has a lot more control over those different scenarios during role play, and you don't have to worry about extraneous variables of something else that could go on in the environment that might kind of throw off that new hire of what skill they're really practicing and targeting. Reinforcement. We all know reinforcement works to increase behaviors, so make sure your trainers are providing reinforcement for those new emerging skills. Self-monitoring, that's going to be another really great strategy that you can have your new hire engage in. So just like we might self-monitor with a client, you can apply that to staff behavior. In the past, I have liked to do things with staff where they maybe, complete a self-assessment on the competency list of where they are in terms of those skills. I, as the trainer, maybe complete one, kind of see where they are. Having the new hire also track their progress on those different goals. Maybe they know that they need to potentially work on parent training and they're aware of that. So you come up with some objective goals and they're monitoring their own behavior around that. Also, self-monitoring is going to be really effective in the sense that when your new hire is able to self-identify, here's things I need to work on, and are advocating for themselves to the trainer, it's going to be really easy for the trainer to pop in and start helping them out with those skills that they want to see emerging or things that they feel they need to improve on. And you are going to have a lot of buy-in from that new hire to start working on those skills. Also shaping. I always think about shaping with, maybe you're onboarding a brand new staff that's pursuing their RBT. They're brand new to the field. They've never worked with a client before. Just like we would reinforce those successive approximations for a client, you want to do that with staff. Nothing is going to be perfect, right? But we want to shape up those behaviors and be providing that reinforcement along the way. I just put down here in bold, just remember, strategies we use with our client are just as effective with staff. By no means is this list of training strategies comprehensive. There's tons of things that you can do to train staff. So just be thinking about how can I use some of those tools and skills I already have to effectively train in these new hires. I wanted to go ahead and go over just some different considerations for feedback. Feedback, right? Sometimes this can be a touchy subject, especially if it's corrective. So I wanted to kind of go over some of these considerations. These would be things I would flag for those individuals that are trainers. You want them to be mindful of what their feedback looks like, because the feedback is going to be so critical to that new hire getting trained in successfully. Of course, we're again going to be reinforcing those emerging or maybe mastered skills, right? We want to continuously be still providing reinforcement so we can maintain those behaviors we want to see in that staff, and we can start developing those behaviors we want to see or those skills. Be specific with your praise. Nothing is worse than when you go to a training session and someone said, yep, that looked great. We don't know what that means. The new hire has no idea what that means. So be specific, let them know. I really liked how when you were speaking with the parent, you gave a very clear, observable, measurable goal, but you used layman terms and the parent was able to comprehend it, okay? So give very specific praise so they know exactly what you're looking for and they can continue doing that exact behavior. I often like to tie in my reinforcement to long-term goals and why it's important. This really just helps with buy-in. All of you here are starting up your new business, okay? You probably are starting up your new business because you have an idea of what you want your training or what you want your service model to look like. And that's unique to you and it's going to be important to you. Individuals coming into your organization might not know the reasons why you want things done a certain way because you're trying to achieve a certain model. Have an open, transparent conversation and tie that importance back to those long-term goals of what you're trying to achieve so they really understand it and they can buy in and they can also assist you with obtaining, you know, whatever that service model you're looking for or goals for those clients. Be excited, right? You want to create an environment that's fun to work in, right? That company culture. It's positive, it's encouraging. So trainers should really be thinking about, you know, how can I make this session fun? How can I make it effective? How can I make it so my new hire walks out the door and is feeling great and they're excited to learn and they want to keep learning? Corrective feedback, okay? This has to come at some point, right? You're going to have prepared your trainers that they are going to be giving feedback to these new hires. Things for them to think about when they are providing that feedback is they should be specific, again, right? We don't want, you know, very specific. We want to see this instead of that and give very clear, concise examples. Show staff the data when possible, just like we do with clients. Data is powerful, okay? If you maybe have like a new RBT, for example, and you're working on rate of reinforcement, maybe you as the trainer are taking tallies of when they were delivering reinforcement. The schedule might be off. That's okay. Show the individual, have them see that information, provide some feedback, some modeling, some role play, whatever that other strategy to teach them, and take some more data. You want to be able to show staff objectively kind of maybe where their areas of improvement are needed. And also you want to show them when they are, you know, increasing those skills you want to see and the trainer is actually being effective. Because as we know, if the trainer's not being effective, we should be reevaluating the way that we're working with that individual to get them to grasp that skill. Your timing. This again is where this really needs to be as immediate as possible. We talked a little bit already about how you might have those debrief sessions. So feedback can be fairly immediate. Okay, this is again going to tie back into if these are new skills, this trainee or this new hire has never performed, they are going to need immediate feedback. Think about airless learning, you know, what we do with some of our clients. Sometimes you might be able to pop in immediately and provide immediate feedback, especially if you're using something in your toolkit like role play and there's no one else present but you and the new hire. You can provide feedback in the moment. And that is, again, why that skill of role playing and practicing role playing is going to be really valuable for your new hire. We don't want the timing of feedback to be so delayed that maybe you're only checking in with this individual once a week, because by the time you check in with them, they may have made this error over and over again several times. So if we can just, you know, address it from the beginning and immediately, it's going to be better for the new hire as well as better for yourself. Be direct. People are often really uncomfortable with being direct when they're providing feedback. Being direct is actually being kind to your new hire. Okay. If you just can tell the individual what you're looking for in a direct way, it's transparent and everybody's on the same page. Being direct is not synonymous with being mean. And I feel like sometimes people feel like it is mean to be direct, but really being direct is the most respectful thing you can do for someone that you're training so they know what you're looking for and they can improve. It's really frustrating to be on the receiving end of feedback that isn't direct, isn't clear, because you're going to just, that new hire is going to just be engaging in a lot of different behaviors trying to figure out what you're looking for when you could have just probably told them or you could have showed them. The feedback sandwich. Some of you have probably heard of the feedback sandwich. This is when you are giving praise and then you throw that button and then you deliver some feedback. Again, being direct. Give your praise, give your feedback, whatever order. Doesn't matter, but try to eliminate using that word button there. Often once people hear that, you did a really good job with your timing of your prompts today, but once they hear that but, they missed all of that positive feedback that you had given them. So really be mindful of that. I have a quote down here that's from Aubrey Daniels. He's one of our leaders in organizational behavior management. It says, don't use the occasion for praise as an opportunity to prompt or instruct. And that really ties back into, feedback in general. We don't want to devalue our praise by always using those opportunities when we're praising to provide them with corrective feedback. So I just really encourage everybody to be really mindful and considerate and really preparing your trainers for giving feedback to really make sure that's going to be a good training experience for that new hire. Train the trainer. This is going to be a model that I really suggest you start thinking about, especially if you're in the startup phase of your business. Okay. Train the trainer is going to allow you to create subject matter experts internally within your organization. This is going to be imperative to you being able to sustain growth and grow effectively. Okay. And it's going to streamline the onboarding process. You might consider having one trainer for each job role. Maybe you're not quite there yet. Maybe there's only one person that's kind of training everybody on like the basics of data collection, the basics of session note writing, whatever those pieces are. But what you want to do is you want to pick people, again, that are going to really be competent. They are going to be able to obtain, understand, and be subject matter experts in whatever area that you need them to be a subject matter expert in. They're going to be able to effectively train. They're going to know those teaching strategies and training strategies. They're going to know policies and procedures within your organization. So that way they're able to help do some turnaround training to the other individuals within your organization. Okay. You might eventually, as you're growing your company, you might need to have an RBT trainer and a BCBA trainer. You might just have one trainer. That's something for you internally to think about and decide what's going to make sense for your company and who those individuals should be. Again, it's going to still incorporate those competency checklists, feedback, and BST. So you should be identifying people that you feel like are going to be able to rock it and help those new hires get onboarded. As you're growing, again, most effective way to train in your new hires. It's a lot easier to have, one person that's maybe responsible for onboarding 5 RBTs versus, 5 separate people that aren't really familiar with the onboarding process, trying to train in each and RBT themselves. Planning for the future, you're in your startup phase right now, but I'm going to guess if you came to this presentation today about onboarding new employees and new hires, you're going to be looking to grow your business. Today, what we went over was really foundational skills and procedures that you should be looking at to help kind of get this onboarded process kicked off and, so you can hit the ground running as your client list is growing and you're needing to grow your business. Start, you might not be in a place today where you're going to be hiring, a new employee next week, but it doesn't mean that you can't start going through this information, getting your thoughts out, and getting it together. So the day you need to hire somebody new, you have a tentative plan in place and you're ready to go. as your company is growing, you are going to need to continuously evaluate this process. It's going to need to change. What you create today as a startup maybe, and you have 2 employees, it's going to be very different if you grow your company to where you have 50 employees. Okay, so think about what your long-term goals are, but be okay with continually evaluating that process to really help sustain that growth of your company. I really hope everybody today enjoyed this presentation and you're able to take this information and really apply it and start thinking about those next steps for you as a business owner and how to start bringing on new employees to your organization.
Awesome. Thank you, Kaitlyn. Lots of good strategies that were shared, and really appreciate you giving us all of those recommendations. I put in the chat, but for anyone that may have missed it, we do have a few additional minutes. If you have any questions, there is an area in your GoToWebinar pane that is a questions tab. So feel free to chat those in to us, and we are going to be able to answer a few of them with the time we have left. While you are doing that, I am putting into the chat area a link to our ABA Startup Community user group on Facebook. So that is where we post a lot of our webinars and additional resources for anyone who is considering or who has started their own practice. So you can see any additional webinars that are going to be available in there. You can talk to other entrepreneurs who are starting their own practice and bounce ideas off of each other. Some of the questions that were coming in as Kaitlyn was presenting are related more toward access to the slides and everything like that. So you will receive a follow-up email with all of the presentation materials and the recording from our webinar today. Kaitlyn, there are a couple questions that came in earlier while you were chatting, and one of them is going back to the self-monitoring checklist that you were referring to. Do you have any examples of self-monitoring checklists or any recommendations if you were to maybe create your own self-monitoring checklist?
Yeah, so it really depends on how you want to break it down. I don't have any tangible examples on me right now, but I can give you some examples of the way that I would incorporate self-monitoring for new hires, maybe when I'm training them in. I'm going to use the example of an RBT, just because likely that probably will be one of the first employees many of you will hire. So if there's an area where you noted this individual maybe needs improvement on some area of the competency checklist, okay? Let's say that the individual is really struggling with implementing behavior plans to fidelity, okay? You might have a specific client where, you know, you are thinking that they're struggling, we've got to practice this, creating almost like a task analysis, so a step-by-step of what they should be doing, providing that to them. And as they're performing those different steps with the client, they might be noting like, oh, I did this, oops, I forgot to repeat the SD, or I didn't block problem behavior, whatever that was in the behavior plan. So they can start kind of monitoring their own behavior. I've actually done the same thing with rate of reinforcement with a lot of RBTs where maybe I have them tally like quickly, like as they're delivering reinforcement or when they did, because maybe during a DTT session, they should be providing reinforcement at a certain rate. So just setting up to even something so simple like that, where it's like acquisition skills presented, maintenance, and then delivered reinforcement, they're just tallying. So they can see like each kind of section of when they're presenting skills, how often were they reinforcing. So it's really going to be kind of up to you, but you can break it down on a very small level if they are going to self-monitor.
Perfect, thank you. Another question came in, and again, these may just be recommendations, but what is the timeline for onboarding or completing the competency checklist? This attendee understands it varies, but could it go on as long as a month, or would 1 to 2 weeks be sufficient? And RBT, again, as an example.
Okay, yeah, and so again, this is going to be kind of like, I'm going to give you my recommendation or what I've done in the past. Typically for RBTs, I've typically done about a 2-week onboarding period, just to really make sure that they are competent in those areas, especially if they're going to be independent with clients. And also thinking about those client demographics. Do they engage in high problem behavior? Those pieces. So that's really going to be something specific for you. But typically onboarding, I've experienced it's usually about 2 weeks.
Great. Should the BCBA who will supervise a new hire RBT partake in the orientation, or should they have a separate meeting on day one, or both?
That's going to be something that's going to be really up to you. So really the idea around having like that one trainer that's really guiding and leading implementation is great. I think supervisors should always be involved if those individuals are going to be on their direct cases. And maybe that's something where, for me in the past, what I've done is if I know a new RBT is going to be working with a client, I might have the BCBA do a direct therapy session. So they're modeling, running programs and modeling it for that new hire who will be the RBT. So there's going to be like a couple different ways you can go about it. And that's really going to be what you think is best for your company.
Excellent. All right. It does not look like we have any other questions. I'll give it about 1 more minute in case anyone is typing. I just put up 2 more links in the chat. So while the Startup Community webinar series is not available for CEs, Rethink does provide CE eligible webinars. So there are 2 in the chat for November 15th and December 15th. This is our series called Our Next Guest, and it's a conversational style webinar with Dr. Bridget Taylor. In November, we are going to be hosting Tyra Sellers, who is going to be focusing on ethics in supervision. And in December, Hank Schlinger is going to join us to talk about his new book, How to Build Good Behavior and Self-Esteem in Children. So if you're interested in joining for either of those, you have the link in the chat. You can sign up, and they are both eligible for 1 CE each. The Tyra Sellers one is going to be available for 1 ethics CE. Kaitlyn, thanks again for all of the, we have 1 more question come in. Do you have any suggestions or experience in working interviews?
Working interviews? Yeah. Is there anything in specific, whoever wrote that you want me to go over with interviews, or do you just want to hear kind of like best practices and questions? Or
Elizabeth, if you can maybe give us a specific scenario or elaborate on that question, that would be great. Any best practice advice, she said.
Anything best practice. All right. Well, I'll kind of just start from the beginning. So with interviewing, the way I've done it in the past is, right, I created like a list of interview questions that I always wanted to make sure that I was going to ask whoever I was hiring. Those questions are really going to vary from position to position, right? I want to know different things about a BCBA than I want to know when I'm hiring an RBT versus scheduler. So those questions, create a question list out prior to make sure that you do ask that individual those important key questions. I always like to note what their answers are. My style for interviewing is probably different than other people's. You kind of will figure that out as you go. I like to get to know the person, right? Company culture to me is very important. So when usually staff come in to interview, I've looked at their resume, I have a general idea of their experience, but I want them to tell me about themselves. I want them to highlight some of their strengths. I don't necessarily ask them what their strengths are, but I want to ask about their background, where they've worked, what type of clients they've maybe worked with. Then I am going to launch into some of my questions, which might include like, have you worked with problem behavior? What does that problem behavior look like? Are you familiar with using BST to teach social skills? What range of clients have you worked with? Early learners, older kids? Have you worked with adults? Just so I can get kind of a good feel for what their skill set is. Also, I like to, check out if they're going to be professional. That's important. They're going to be going in clients' homes. So I always ask for references. I think it's really important in our field that you do call and you ask somebody else about how that individual's performance was. Also with interviewing, I like to find out too what that individual's interests are. We want to keep our new employees with us at our company. So knowing maybe in your head things that they're interested in and wanting to pursue. So if there is an opportunity within your company, you're able to get them to kind of help out with that. That's going to make them want to be there more long term. I think with interviewing too, it's always nice to have 2 rounds of interviews. Right, one person maybe meets them, or maybe you have 2 people join the interview, like a supervisor or another RBT chat with the person. That way you can get a better feel for the individual if they're really going to kind of fit within your organization.
Thank you so much. Let's see. Do you have any recommendations for how long or what steps go with the interview process?
What steps? Really going to be like dependent. I don't think you should make people wait forever, right? So I would say get your, it's not fair to the new hire. They're probably looking at new jobs. And if you find somebody you like, you want to snag them, right? So usually like going through resumes, I know when I was doing a lot of hiring, I would go through resumes multiple times a day as they were coming in. If we're looking to hire, having them try to come in as immediate as possible within a couple days, interview them. Usually, I would say if you're interviewing like a round of candidates, give yourself a couple days. If you have like 5 candidates you're looking at, and then usually deciding, within that week. This is your company. You're going to have a good gauge on who you want to work there and how you feel in comparison when you're interviewing people against kind of each other. Because you want to pick maybe the one best person at the time, or you might just be hiring 2 people and you've maybe seen 5. So it's going to be up to you. I wouldn't drag it out too long because I feel like after you interview them, if you decide you want to move forward, you need to get that offer letter out to them. You need to know what you're going to be paying them in that offer letter and present that information to them so they have time to counter that offer if they're looking for something more. And then you can work with them from there.
One more question going back to the working interview. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations for actually practicing any of those job skills on the interview, whether it's with a client or with role play, things like that?
Role play all day, every day, right? I have definitely made people role play and it was super awkward, and that's okay. Sometimes, people say they have different skills and you don't know, so they can role play it with you. Maybe giving them something as simple as, a scenario of having a really difficult parent conversation. That's something a lot of BCBAs need to know how to do. You might role play that and see how they respond.
Perfect. All right. I think that's it for the questions. So just one more reminder, there are several links in your chat area. The first is to our ABA Startup Community user group on Facebook. One thing I don't think I mentioned earlier is that you can also have access to our Rethink website. We have a sandbox that you can go in and play around with if you are part of that user group. So if you are not using Rethink but are considering a practice management platform, that is something that we offer for free as part of our user group. You also have 2 links there for CE webinars that we have coming up in November and December. Again, that's with Kaitlyn Taylor, and she is hosting Tyra Sellers in November and Hank Schlinger in December. So feel free to sign up for those so you can earn a couple free CEs. Kaitlyn, thank you again for joining us today. We truly appreciate your time and expertise. Everyone, as you are leaving, you're going to be receiving a post-webinar survey. We would love your feedback on the webinar today and anything that you would like presented for future topics. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and thanks again for coming.
Bye, everyone.